Hey there, my name is Adam, also known as Patty from the YouTube channel Patty's Aquatics. Now, Zach reached out to me recently. I had done an interview style video like this with him just over a year ago, where he kind of got to know me a little better, and he asked if I'd be interested in doing a part 2 to kind of add on to that, and obviously I'd be interested. Welcome to my fish room. I'm going to show you around a little bit and answer some of these questions that Zach has prepared for me. What has changed in my fish room since last year? I've added a lot more new tanks. That has been the biggest addition to my fish room since last year. I have many more tanks in here, added different varieties of fish and different sizes as well, as you can see. Now, the biggest changes in this fish room have probably been the addition of my Oscar tank. Now, that is an Oscar in a dirted filterless aquarium, which we'll talk about again a little later, and my Fahaka puffer, which I brought down here. I don't think this was in the video last year. I can't remember offhand, to be honest with you. Another dirted filterless aquarium. Also, the addition to all the stuff that is up here. I have these little nano jars that I've started that are all dirted, except for that one. This is a little culture collection. This guy right here, this has probably been one of my most fascinating aquariums lately. This is what I call the resurrection aquarium. Now, if you're not familiar with like a resurrection jar that kind of Father Fish made a little interesting, is bringing a handful of material, organic material like leaf litter from the bottom of a lake or river and putting them in a jar typically. Well, what I did is I put it in a small 2.5 gallon aquarium, added a little sand and some plants, and I've really been watching all these organisms just flourish, take off and swim around everywhere. It's very interesting. My long-term plans with this really is to watch and observe it for probably a few months and make sure there's nothing bad in here. Now, my options are either to just use this as an aquarium as itself and just monitor the life in here and see how they interact, but also culture some of the organisms that are in it. Or what I can do as well is make sure that there's nothing in here that I don't want. And I could take some of these leaves out of this container and add them to my aquariums and replace with dried dead leaves in here. And this can be my little culture area. So like I said, this is a very interesting part of my fish room right now that I'm absolutely loving. Now, this wall of aquarium features different types of fish and aquariums. What I keep mostly right now, I have a bunch of mutt guppies in this one that I had growing out in my summer tubs, which I plan on selling soon. And then I'm going to do something different with that tank. I'm not 100% sure wise, but something different with fish. I have another breed of guppy in here. Those are going to be leaving the fish room as well, because that's the tank I plan on putting those Medaka rice fish I'm growing out into. This tank here, as you can see, is cloudier than cloudy. I have some Medaka rice fish in this one as well that I had gotten from LRB Aquatics. They are orange and red Kingiyama Medakas. With my tanks, well, how I set them up with dirted tanks and no filter, I typically run into cloudy water within the first couple months, and it can last anywhere from week to months. It gets really cloudy like this, and then overnight, magically, it goes away. So I know looking at this tank, some people may be concerned and saying, well, you need to have filtration in there. You need this, you need that. Bottom line is the plants are my filtration in all my aquariums. For the most part, I'll get into that a little bit. They filter my water, and there is no need for filtration when it comes to that. But the cloudy water itself, like I said, is just a natural progression with my tanks and how I set them up. They're short term, and then once they go away, they turn crystal clear, just like the rest of my aquariums. This is a 20 long with my rare Matano rice fish. These as well I got from LRB Aquatics. They're very cool. They're typically very skittish, so they may not stick around very long for you to see. They have really cool blue eyes. I've been trying to get them to breed in here. I've been seeing eggs on the bellies of the females here and there, but I haven't been successful. Now with this one, you might be able to see back there, yes, I did add a filter. I did have a live stream just recently with Corey from Aquarium Co-op, and we discussed the whole dirted tank aspect, more so the way that I keep my tanks with no filters and no air. And he really recommended that I maybe should add air back into my aquariums, and he thinks it would be beneficial, really not to the tanks themselves, but to these guys, the fish. So with this tank itself, I dropped an air line in, and I thought, why not? I have all these filters. Let's throw one in there. I want to do a little bit of testing. We'll throw a filter in a tank here or there. I really want to see what the differences are going to be between all of them long term. Now I also have two 10-gallon tanks down here that I'm using as breeding projects, which again, I think we'll talk about again a little later, so we'll show that a little better then. Now on this wall up here, this is my rack of 29s with my little nano aquarium in the center. What I have here is my high fin blue coral varieties. Not 100% sure if I'm going to be sticking with them yet, so we'll have to see, but I absolutely love the look of those fish. I have koi swordtails down on this aquariums here. These as well are another species of fish that I think I might be moving on from. It may sound weird that I'm going to be moving on from so many different fish within my fish room, but it's a natural progression for me. I get fish, I keep them all in species only aquariums, and what I like to do is try to breed them. I don't get fish just to breed them. It's not my only interest. I do love to try to breed fish when I get them. It's part of the challenge for me, but I enjoy being able to breed them, populate my tanks more with that. If I have overfill, I will wind up selling them, but it gets to the point where I get bored sometimes. And with these live bearers, I've started to get bored. I've had them for probably about 3-4 years now. I had a few different species of fish I really want to try that are egg scatterers. This one I just set up not too long ago. This is a 2.5-gallon aquarium, and my whole idea was to set up a dirted little nano aquarium. Now this one has a built-in filter on the hood of it, so I've been running it with a filter. I only had a couple shrimp in there as of right now. It's only been set up for probably 3 weeks now, so the algae is starting to kind of take control, which is a natural progression again with these dirted tanks that I set up. After they balance themselves out, that algae always winds up going away. Down here is my white cloud minnow aquarium, and I have red rilly shrimp in here. Now this one I've been battling with lots and lots of mulm. I have tried to take some of that mulm out of there, but for some reason, I don't know where it's all coming from, but it really clouds up this water. I did wind up putting a power head in there just to kind of circulate the water a little bit. I may wind up, to be quite honest, throwing a sponge filter in there and seeing if that will help at all. It doesn't hurt the fish any or the shrimp. It's just more for my own want to be able to see crystal clear water. It's been a little frustrating in this one. I also have a few breeding for profit tubs down here as well. These are 3 tubs, totes themselves, that I put together with just sand, and I have different species of plants in there, and I have a different types of shrimp in each one. My idea is when my swap season comes around, which I believe will be next month, I'll see what I got in there, and I'll take out any excess and I'll sell them at that swap for a few extra bucks, which would in turn get me new fish. Lastly is over here, which is my 55-gallon tank that I set up this summer. This is my lone and only non-dirted aquarium that is in my fish room that is set up like with plants in this, besides my breeding setups. Currently have some mixed guppies in there, and that's not going to stay. My plan is to put an axolotl in here. At some point I will get one. That's what my daughter's always wanted, so I set this tank up specifically for that. I didn't dirt it because I really wanted to see the difference with a deep sand substrate compared to dirt, and I want to treat it the exact same way as I treat my dirted aquariums. And it's full of plants. Now you can see it's cloudy as well. This one was just set up a few months ago, and I honestly think some of that may be due to this wood, because I also have that same wood in that other 20-gallon that's also cloudy. But I also just put a wave maker in there yesterday. I wanted to see if any circulation of the water would help, but you can really see the cloudiness of that water moving around, which is very intriguing. But that should clear up as well, not too long. So the next question is, what are your keys to a simple, successful dirted tank? Really with that is really patience. Patience is the biggest thing, and make sure you do your research. Those are the 2 biggest things you can do, because you don't want to step into something without knowing really what you're doing, because you want to be successful. And to be successful, you need to do your research, know things about it, and also, like I said, patience, because there are so many things throughout the progression of one of these style of tanks, like you've seen with my cloudy water before, that you need to potentially work your way through before you get to that other side and have that elaborate, awesome, lush green aquarium. Because these type of tanks are not a quick fix, not a quick aquarium. It's a long-term project that you really need to enjoy, but you need to put some work into it as well. So how do you keep plants healthy in a dirted aquarium? Well, the simple answer to that is I don't. They do it themselves. Now, if you think about it with these dirted aquariums, that rich, thick soil layer is just a fuel source for those plants. And if you're going to have a dirted aquarium, you obviously your focal point plant-wise are going to be root feeders. You want to take advantage of that. So they pull all those nutrients out of that soil and it helps them grow tremendously. And that's the biggest thing. There isn't really much I have to do. You just got to put the plants in there that are going to take advantage of that and they're going to grow. Now, the second part of this question was if I could recommend any low-tech type plants for this type of aquarium. And really, anything that's going to be a root feeder is going to work great, but I would recommend in the beginning stages to make sure you get lots of fast-growing stem plants because they are going to be tremendously beneficial for pulling all that excess nutrients out of the water column when you first start. And some of the ones that I use are Ludwigia, Pogostem and Stellatus octopus, and Dorsagittaria. I use them within all my aquariums. Matter of fact, I started out with a few bundles in each one of my aquariums, and I've been growing them ever since. I trim them, cultivate them, put them in the rest of my tanks, and those are my focal points because, well, it's much cheaper if you can grow your own plants and keep putting them in your own tanks. So the next question is to list some important things to know when first setting up a dirted tank. Now, I mentioned a few of these in previous questions, but the number one thing you should know is when you first set one of these things up, make sure you put lots of fast-growing stem plants in there because, like I mentioned earlier, they really help pull that excess nutrients out of the water column. When you first set these things up, they are very hot, full of nutrients, and it's really important to make sure you do that and also add floating plants. Floating plants is another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, and it doesn't matter what type of floating plant because they're also going to help pull those nutrients out of the water column itself. Now, if you don't do that, I mentioned my puffer tank, you run into major issues, especially with algae, and that's really something that you don't want to have to deal with. Now, the other part of it is patience. You really need to have patience when it comes to these type of tanks. These aren't tanks that are going to look great right away. They're going to have turns in them, and you really have to wait for that balance to happen within them. And the last part of this that I want to address really is that if you're not familiar with live plants, these tanks can be a little difficult. And it's really something, like I said, to make sure you do your research and really know what you're getting yourself into before you jump head first into one of these, or you might get yourself over your head. No one wants that to happen. So right now, currently, I'm trying to breed white cloud minnows again. And what I've been doing is I have males segregated into this 10-gallon, and then I have females segregated in that 10-gallon. What I've been doing is feeding them heavy a couple times a day with high protein foods. And then what I do is I put them in this bucket and I put some mesh at the bottom of the buckets. I put one female to two male in each one, and I'll let them in there for a couple days, then take the males and females out, put them back into their separate aquariums. And then I watch these buckets to see what happens. Now, I have not been successful yet. I really wanted to try this. I've tried different ways of trying to breed these white clouds before. I've had some success, but I really thought this would be a much better way to be able to do it. So time will only tell. These Matano rice fish are another one that I really want to try to breed soon. I'm really hoping. I have found a few eggs within the fish tank here. I did pull a few out a while back, but they never hatched. These are a tropical rice fish though. They're not the cold water ones. So I had them in a non-heated little container. So that might've been some of the reason why, but they're also known to predate on their young. And I have a bunch of snails in here too, which really don't help anything. So I'm really hoping that this thicker, very dense planted aquarium is going to be more successful for them to be able to do it naturally within this aquarium itself. The other fish I want to try to breed in here are these rainbow shiners of mine. I attempted to breed them not too long ago and really disaster struck. I had them in one of those 10 gallons those white clouds are in. I had a power head in there and put them in a basket, and I believe the flow was too much, and 3 of them wound up dying. So all I have left now is 1 female and 3 males. What's going to be happening here very soon in the fish room is I have my wife's cousin wound up getting rainbow shiners from White Cloud Dynasty. And if he breeds some of the best rainbow shiners there are around, well, my wife's cousin's got some of them and he started breeding them himself. And he's given me a bunch of baby fry that were just born not too recently. And they're going to go in one of those 10 gallons. And once they get big enough, they'll go in here. And then these guys, I'm going to try to pull out and try to breed myself. So that's the plans with them. And that's really the breeding projects that I have going on currently in my fish room. How do you keep an Oscar in a planted, dirted aquarium? Well, that's a question that isn't fully answered yet. And I'm hoping to be able to fully answer it later. What I did is there's a few things you have to overcome to start with. One, you know cichlids like to dig. So what I did is the substrate. I added my dirt layer, I put a little bit of sand cap, put some egg crate on top, and then sand on top of that. That way there's no way that this guy can ever dig into the substrate and hit that dirt layer. So that's the first thing that I looked at. The next thing is obviously you don't want the fish to be able to rip up your plants. And that's something that I still have to watch for because he's probably only about, I don't know, maybe 6 inches long or so. He's still got a few months before he probably really reach sexual maturity and we find out really if he becomes a butthead or not. But that was my plan, was to introduce this fish at a very young age. I got it at about 2 inches long. It wasn't very big at all. You introduce the fish to the plants right away when it's young, so that's used to it. It loves the plants. It likes to hide in the plants and hang out within them, and I'm hoping that will continue. Now, if you stick a adult Oscar into a planted aquarium that's never been used to plants, I highly doubt it's going to work. I really feel you need to put one in here that has accustomed to the plants already and knows about them and uses them. Like I said, this fish loves the plants and he loves to hide within them. I haven't seen him really uproot any plants as of yet. It's been very successful so far, and I'm really hoping that long term it will continue with that. There's lots of hurdles I still have to overcome with this guy, and mostly that's seeing what kind of temperament that fish has. That's another big thing to talk about too, is it's really going to depend on the temperament of the fish. I could do all of this and have one that, like I said, grows up to be a big butthead and just wants to destroy everything, and it's just not going to work. Or I could get one that's a little bit more docile and doesn't really care too much and is laid back, and it can be successful. So I could go all through this and still get a fish that winds up being a butthead and it not work, but you just never know. I'm all about challenging myself. I like to try different things and try to think outside the box. I really believe there's always ways to do things if you do lots of research, just looking into things to make sure that you do things the correct way and give yourself a chance to be successful. And I think that's very important in this hobby. Just because something is said that it can't be done doesn't mean that it can't be. How has the Fahaka puffer tank been doing? Well, that one's been kind of hit or miss, not because of the Fahaka puffer, more because of the plants. I've been struggling with this tank from the very beginning, mostly because of my own fault. I didn't put enough stem plants in this aquarium to start off with, and what that does is cause major problems and causes lots of algae, and I had so many battles with algae and cyanobacteria on my substrate that it really made this whole tank such a head scratcher and just frustration for quite a while. Now, this tank has been up for just over a year now, and it's finally starting to kind of dial in and settle in. This guy himself, he's been doing great. He absolutely loves this tank. I don't think it really matters as long as you feed him. That's all he ever wants to be done, is just fed. He loves food. I do have a variety of different plants in here, mostly fast growing because I really want them to take off. I do have some swords in here. I do have some brown leaves. Now, the reason for that is I pulled them out of my summer tubs to plant in here not too recently. And whenever I move Amazon swords, the plant's leaves always die and I get new shoots, which is happening right now. I also have a few buddies for him in there, and these are some guppy endlers that I have in here. Now, I don't feed those guys. As you can see, they're feeding off some of the algae of that wave maker right now. Their purpose is basically to eat any type of waste off the bottom that this guy might leave, which typically isn't much because he likes to eat everything. They can feed on algae and any other living things, and he typically is okay with them. He's going to pick one off here and there. It's just the nature of the beast. That's why I would never put anything expensive or loving in here again. I learned my lesson once before. I put a little angelfish in here that I grew out that was about 3 inches long. They were getting along great. They were right by each other, feeding all the time. And then one day I came down here and it was just gone. So I learned my lesson to never put anything in here that I value anymore. So that's why we have little guppies in here. I put them in there as a little tiny fry and they'll grow up. As they get bigger, they probably will wind up getting pegged off, but they serve a purpose. They serve a purpose on helping to be cleanup crews in this aquarium. Like I said, it's been doing pretty good now, about a year in. It has been a battle, but that guy, I love him. So how do I maintain my setups and fertilize my tanks? To maintain them, I really don't do too much. There's lots of talk out there about doing water changes, not doing water changes. I 100% believe you need to do water changes in your aquariums. Now, the frequency is really what we should be talking about. There are some people that have dirty tanks that don't do water changes at all. I don't agree with that, but that's to each their own. That's completely fine. I like to do water changes. Again, I'm talking about frequency. I don't do them that often. I probably do them every like 2 months or so, really when they need it to be done. And that's the biggest thing to really latch onto with this conversation, with maintaining it with water change wise, is really to know what your tanks are like and when you feel they need to have water changes. But in the end, my personal opinion is they really do need to have water changes. Now, as far as other maintaining parts, my biggest thing is really trimming plants. That's the biggest thing, and probably the hardest part. It doesn't sound like hard, it is like a luxury because I can add those plants to other tanks, but I'm constantly trimming plants. As far as fertilizing, I don't fertilize my aquariums. I haven't done so in well over a year. Really, that nutrient-rich soil helps that and really stops me from having to do that, but I don't use a lot of plants that are water column feeders as well, so I use a lot of root feeding plants, which helps me prevent from having to use fertilizers. So the last question is, what are my future plans for my fish room and for my channel? Now, I mentioned I had that live stream with Corey from Aquarium Co-op earlier, and if you'd asked me this question before that live stream, my answer would be completely different. I can say having that conversation with him about dirty tanks for quite a while, not only dirty tanks, but the way that I maintain my dirty tanks, I really feel like I almost had like an enlightening when it comes to the way that I do things. For my tanks and my fish rooms, really what's going to change is not so much the dirty tanks, because I love dirty tanks and I think they're very beneficial, but it's really the way that I maintain them with the no air and no filter approach. With the no filter approach, I really truly believe that they're fine. They've been running that way for years. I have so many plants within my aquariums that really help naturally filter the aquariums, but it's really that no air approach. I took them out probably about 7-8 months ago, the air from all my aquariums, and everything appears to be doing fine, but Corey's points were completely and utterly valid of coming to that. I really don't know what the dissolved oxygen levels are within my aquariums. I don't physically see my fish struggling, but what's the point of not having air in there then? So I really took that to heart, and I'm really looking into that deeper. As you've seen, I do have a tank with a filter and a few with air stones now. I'm really wanting to watch and kind of test that and see what the comparisons might be. And I'm thinking about getting one of those dissolved oxygen meters really to test that as well. So that really has opened my eyes when it comes to that part of it, that I really want my fish to be healthy. That's important. Is the air going to hurt or help the plants? No, but it's really going to be beneficial for those fish. And that's what's important to me. What's going to change with the channel? Now, that's another thing from that live stream, is really that Corey felt that these dirty tanks can come off as something that's very easy for beginners to really get into. And I agree with them that that is the case, that what it seems like, and I don't want to be part of that trend. So my biggest goal for this next year is really to educate more on my channel when it comes to these dirty tanks. I really want to play my part and help educating people that have no knowledge of plants to really know what they're getting into if they really decide to jump headfirst into these types of aquariums. That's the plans for my fish room and my channel. So I just want to say thank you very much to Zach for allowing me to come on here on his channel again and open up about the way I do things, the way I feel about my dirty tanks. It's very important in this community of fish keepers that we have, that we support each other. And I really appreciate what Zach's doing. So thank you very much. And I hope to see you in my channel someday.